Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 143 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, which has not forgotten all its pride and dignity. Not yet, at any rate.
What little of each there was in the first place, that is.
Quite true.
But folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room, and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who has never journeyed all alone for 110 days, Alan Sisto.
Well, that's because I can drive, or even fly, though I have to say, journeying all alone for 110 days doesn't sound so bad sometimes. I didn't say that.
No, not at all. Nobody heard that at all.
No.
When you say you can fly, the first thing I can think of is, well, I've noticed you do not so much fly as plummet.
Well said.
But I suppose you probably meant in an airplane.
Yeah, I did intend that particular meaning, yes.
But you do have that tricked-out DeLorean to take us back in time.
Oh, no, they said don't sing, man. They were right.
I know, and that's why I did it. That's what makes it fun.
Or funny.
That's what makes it fun.
Okay.
I'm sorry to everyone out there. Back in time to something we recorded a few weeks ago.
Well, today we're bringing you another new installment of The North Wing.
Barlam and Butterbur had a room or two in the North Wing at the Prancing Pony Inn, made special for hobbits. Well, this is our place made special for some of our listeners to give us a chance to get to know them.
Now, rooms at the North Wing are a little hard to come by these days, so only our patrons at the Elrond's Honorarium and Círdan's contribution tiers are eligible. If you'd like to be one of the next patrons to join us, be sure to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod.
Please do. We've got a waiting list for the North Wing right now, but we'll get to all of those fine folks soon, and we'll make room for more if necessary.
As best we can. Well then, why don't we welcome tonight's guest to the North Wing, Julie Thompson.
Hello.
Hi, Julie. How are you tonight?
I'm good.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
This is a wonderful, wonderful guest room you've got here.
We try to keep it cozy.
The finest in ales and teas and all the other good stuff.
Nice fire blazing.
Yes.
And good company.
Well, that's the idea.
Well,
we hope.
We hope.
We'll do our best.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do our absolute best. Well, why don't we go ahead and get to know you a little bit, Julie? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? What do you do? And what do your loved ones think of all this Tolkien stuff you're so into? Do they think you're a total nerd? Do they dig it? That sort of thing.
Oh, yes. Well, I live right now in the Twin Cities of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I am a Lutheran pastor. I do primarily visitation, the sick and shut-ins and such, but I do preach and teach. I was born in Virginia. My dad was a university professor. I grew up mostly in Mississippi and Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Quite different from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Quite different from Minnesota. There are several times during the year when I look out the window and think, what possessed me to move north? But
as a native Louisianan, I can never get used to the winters up north. I just can't do it. I stay down here.
Yeah. I understand the temptation. So I actually was introduced to Tolkien Christmas of 1977.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes, my mother bought me the box set, The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits, the Houghton Mifflin set.
Right.
Let's see, I think I was 11 that year. So I was a little bit young for them. And I remember looking at them and thinking, ooh, this doesn't look really good. It was too many words and just very strange. But
yeah,
I was also really bored because it was Christmas break and I started on The Hobbit and just never really came up for air.
That's wonderful.
Know that feeling.
Yeah. And my mother has said more than once that she made a big mistake. She should have. She was going back and forth between The Lord of the Rings and a jewelry making kit, and she should have gone with the jewelry making kit.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I have, I'm single. I have 2 adopted children.
Oh, wow. Great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Alan, we talked about that at Mythmood, I think.
Oh, that's right. I remember now. It took me a little bit. But
no,
yes,
it's okay. You meet thousands of people, I'm sure. So,
well, I don't know about thousands, but...
And of course, since they've been little, I've been reading to them from The Lord of the Rings and watching movies with them and such. And since they are teenagers, they are both just absolutely mortified that I'm into all this stuff. And don't tell anybody.
Of course.
I can see them now.
I think as teenagers, they'll probably be mortified by whatever we do, right?
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true.
Exactly. I take comfort from that. And I also take comfort from the fact that when they get older, they will return to their natural loves.
We hope so, certainly.
Yes.
Train up a child and all that, right?
Yep.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
That was great. I really enjoyed that answer. That might have been one of our more entertaining sets of answers to that opening question.
Yeah.
Well, the next question, Julie, that we ask everybody who comes to the Prancing Pony, including all of our big name guests, you kind of already answered, is when and how did you first discover Tolkien's work? So we know that. Let's ask a little bit about what your experience was like and why do you keep coming back?
Oh, I was so enraptured by the world building. Middle Earth was a real place. It was really the first sort of adult book that I had ever read. And I can remember reading them on the school bus and sitting there and just being taken completely away. And this was when my dad was at Mississippi State. So I don't know, Sean, have you ever been to Starkville, Mississippi?
I don't believe I have. No, I've been to many parts of Mississippi, but not there.
Yeah. Well, it's a very lovely small town, but this is the days before bookstores were well scattered, shall we say.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of stuff on TV, and my parents were very, very strict about not allowing me to watch more than half an hour of TV in any given day. And so I just read those books over and over and over again. And I was attracted, like I said, Middle Earth was a real place to me. I could see it so clearly. Our next door neighbor had willow trees along the path in his backyard. Spent a lot of time playing under the willow trees and reenacting important scenes. They just sort of became part of me. And then when I grew up, we moved a couple of more times. And every time we moved, there was one person who shared my love of it. And that was like an immediate bonding. I don't know if you've had experiences of moving around a lot as a child, but it's hard sometimes, depending on the age, to fit in and to find people to be friends with. I mean, kids are cliquey. That's just the way they are.
Aren't they?
Yeah. But I always had at least one person who recognized my cryptic commentary about different things. And, you know how it is. You throw out.
It's a good litmus test for new friends, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And, I was like, oh, what a mess. All this flotsam and jetsam.
There you go.
And see how they respond. I always had at least one person. And so it really became a very important part of the way that I met people and socialized and things. And so it's been formative for me, I think.
Yeah. That's great.
And it sounds like that's why you keep coming back. That inner consistency of reality, that nature of the subcreation that is just so, like you said, it's real. It's real in so many ways. Yeah.
It is. And, if I can talk theologically for just a little bit.
Sure.
I realize it's not a religion podcast.
Well, no, but that's okay. We can't avoid it, altogether, of course.
Right. Yeah, no, please, go ahead.
All right. Well, Tolkien's talking about subcreation and the importance of like the how we're made in the image of the Creator, and therefore we are creative.
Right.
That has been really something that I've really worked with a lot as a pastor. And I find, as I know I was going to be talking to you, right? So I've been thinking about what I could say about this, and I realized that I do a lot of visits to women who are older and who are maybe alone in the world.
Yeah.
And a lot of them do things, various crafty things. They make stuff, they create things, they do stuff.
Yeah.
And they have been taught socially to denigrate that and to say, oh, no, I'm just, it's just something I threw together.
Right.
Right.
Like a 6 foot wide tapestry that took them 8 years. I just threw it together.
Yeah. Or I'll go in and I'll talk to somebody and I'll look around and I'll see, here are all these beautiful things that you've made over the course of your life. Oh, it's nothing. And so one of the things that I found that I do with people is I talk to them about how creation, we're made in the image of the Creator. This is a way that we reflect God and glorify God.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference to people when they're able to think about something that they do as being part of their life with God.
That's neat.
That's great.
Yeah.
What an opportunity that is for you.
And so true to Tolkien. I mean, when I think about something like Mythopoeia,
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I've never actually quoted Mythopoeia because I think that would be just one step too geeky.
That might be too narrow of a filter,
Yeah, it's like that's like most of my congregations would be like, what on earth? But they do
gone too far.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? But they do understand that the talk about creation and creator and, sub-creation. And so I've that's been a really vibrant thing for my ministry with people.
That's neat.
That's fantastic. So moving on, Julie, I'd like to ask our next question here. Which is your favorite book in the Legendarium and why? And then I'd also like to ask, what's your favorite work by Tolkien that's not part of the Legendarium, if you have one? And I think now I might have some ideas what that might be. I'd love to hear your answer.
Oh, I might surprise you a little. My favorite book is The Fellowship. And I enjoy that so much. I think partly it is the world building. I've been participating in Corey's Exploring the Lord of the Rings.
Okay. Yeah.
Which has just been phenomenal. And one of the things that it's really like brought clearly to my notice is the descriptive passages. And that book is so full.
Yes, it is.
There's these lovely descriptions at every turn that just make everything come to life. And it's they're walking into danger. They haven't quite gotten there yet. The worst things that are going to happen to them haven't happened. They're still full of hope and happiness. You get to Rivendell.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful before picture and also really eases you into the world. Yeah,
it does.
It really does. And so that's the book that I find myself reading, even if I don't read the whole trilogy sometimes, which of course I read the whole trilogy frequently, but I find that I read sections of The Fellowship quite frequently. For non-Legendarium, actually, I have a real soft spot for Farmer Giles of Ham.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, why not? It's a fun one.
That's a good one. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Mythopoeia is great. Don't take me down, but it is fun. And it was really the first place where I realized that Tolkien had a real sense of humor.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
The dry comments that I had kind of looked at, I was like, is that funny? It could be funny. And I realized, they really were funny.
Yeah.
The blunderbuss thing is just brilliant.
It really dials in that British humor thing. It's great.
It really does. So it's
absolutely.
Not necessarily the greatest work of literature, but I really do have a soft spot for it.
It is enjoyable, no doubt. Well, let's see. Our next question is, did you have any Tolkien goals that you'd like to share with us? Tracking down maybe a special book for a collection or going to another moot, something like that?
Well, let's see. I devote myself to moot attendances, I think. Well, I'll be going to Mythmoot. I make a point of going to the Midwest moots that happen.
Yeah.
We don't have a local Tolkien society, but I've saved my pennies. I'm going to go to the one in Birmingham.
Oh, you are? We're going to see you there. That's great.
We'll see you there in August.
Great. Yeah.
Yes, I promise not to stalk you or be all weird about it.
That is okay. That's great. So now we're saying we'll see you there, but by the time this airs, we will have seen you.
Yeah.
We will have
so we
seen
get that
you,
wonderful time travel issue again. That's great stuff.
Oh, that's always fun.
That's going to be good. We'll look forward to seeing you, or we will have enjoyed seeing you, as the case may be.
Well, I'll go ahead and move on to our lightning round now, and these are going to be quick questions and quick answers, quick as we can make them.
Quickish.
Sure.
Quickish. We'll start with, who's your favorite character in The Lord of the Rings?
Sam.
All right.
Can't argue with that one.
No, you really can't.
I could explain why, but everybody answers Sam, don't they?
That's true.
Well,
who's your favorite elf from the First Age?
Oh, elf from the First Age. I would say Idril.
Oh, that's a very good choice.
That's a good one.
A very unique choice, too, I have to admit.
Yeah. Favorite poem or song in the Legendarium?
I would say that my favorite is the Dwarf Song.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean Gimli's Dwarf Song, not Thorin's Dwarf Song.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Rivendell or Lorien?
Rivendell.
Agreed.
Favorite author or book other than Tolkien?
Ooh, let's see. Actually, I've got kind of a favorite that I've maybe a little. It's called a book called Our Bones Lie Scattered, and it's a nonfiction history of the Indian Mutiny.
Oh wow! Okay.
Wow.
All right.
I don't know why, but
that's niche, but that's good. Yeah.
Cool.
That's why we ask.
I'll look into that.
Well, those are some great answers, Julie. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. We really have enjoyed having you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'm just going to head on out to the common room and enjoy the company.
Good idea. Well, I think it's time for all of us to head that way. We'll join the common room and the rest of the listeners here in just a moment.
That's right. And thank you again, Julie. And hope to see you back at our next Questions After Nightfall if you can make it, if not sooner.
All right.
Well, and now, folks, we'll return you to the podcast already in progress.
And now we're back. But before we go on with the show, we actually should take a moment to say thank you to Julie for the introduction she gave us at Tolkien 2019.
That's right, folks. If her voice sounded familiar to you, it may be because you heard her speaking at the beginning of episode 136 to start this season.
That's right. And she gave us a great introduction. She
really did.
Such a fantastic support to us while we were out there in Birmingham.
Big help.
And so fun to hang out with. So, Julie, thank you so much.
Out. Thank you so much.
And we do have one more thing before we get into our discussion. We have a correction.
Amendment.
Addendum. Proviso.
Yeah. Clarification.
A clarification. Back in episode 139, around the 56-minute mark, we were talking about that comment that Gandalf made to Frodo about those who have dwelt in the Blessed Realm.
Right.
You know, this was the whole idea that they live at once in both worlds, and against both the seen and the unseen, they have great power.
Indeed. We tried to make a list of all the elves that were around in the Third Age who had dwelt in the Blessed Realm. I think I said there aren't going to be very many, and then we listed out Glorfindel, Galadriel, and maybe Celeborn, depending on which version of his story you believe.
Right.
And we also advised you against Googling his original name. We thought that this was a very exclusive club.
We did. And as it turns out, while the club isn't exactly accepting new membership applications, it's not quite as exclusive as we thought. Several of our listeners pointed out that actually probably many of the elves of Rivendell were among the exiled Noldor. Now, we don't know for sure, but when we see an elf like Gildor, who we know is of the house of Finrod,
right,
and therefore he's been around since the First Age, it's pretty likely that he probably came back with Finrod or somebody else from Finarfin's house from across the sea. And he's probably not the only one.
No. Now, of course, we don't know any names that we can say with certainty were in Amon, but it's certainly not fair for us to assume that there are only a few still around. So, oops.
Yeah, you know.
It happens.
We said it.
Yeah.
It happens. And now with that out of the way, we're finally going to take you back to the book.
That's right, because we are all about the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
We are, and we do bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time, but of course you folks know by now that at heart, Alan and I are really fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. That's kind of our passion, obsession.
Yeah, and as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for the show every week. So if you'd like to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we have links to every book we've ever mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other stuff on our website, too. Show notes and book links specific to each episode, outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, and a few other little extras. And you'll also find a link to our new online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP. There you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and other great Prancing Pony Podcast gear as we get our designs up and running. So please check that out.
And now let's get back to the Council of Elrond and see if they've managed to accomplish anything. We're going to start...
Way too early for that, but okay.
Too early. They're still introducing people. We really ended the last episode a lot earlier than we were intending to in terms of the text, but a lot later than we intended to, and according to the clock. Must have been something to do with Corey's presence here, but we certainly aren't complaining, and neither are you, I suspect. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up with Elrond and a little history lesson about the men of Numenor. In the north, after the war and the slaughter of the Gladden fields, the men of Westerness were diminished, and their city of Annúminas beside Lake Evendim fell into ruin, and the heirs of Valandil removed and dwelt at Fornost on the high north downs, and that now too is desolate. Men call it Dead Men's Dyke, and they fear to tread there. For the folk of Arnor dwindled, and their foes devoured them, and their lordship passed, leaving only green mounds and the grassy hills. In the south the realm of Gondor long endured, and for a while its splendor grew, recalling somewhat of the might of Numenor ere it fell. High towers that people built, and strong places, and havens of many ships, and the winged crown of the kings of men was held in awe by folk of many tongues. Their chief city was Osgiliath, citadel of the stars, through the midst of which the river flowed. And Minas Ithil they built, tower of the rising moon, eastward upon a shoulder of the mountains of shadow. And westward, at the feet of the white mountains, Minas Anor they made, tower of the setting sun. There in the courts of the king grew a white tree, from the seed of that tree which Isildur brought over the deep waters, and the seed of that tree before came from Eresia, and before that, out of the uttermost west, in the day before days, when the world was young.
We dive right into the lore, don't we?
Boy, you're not kidding. We just jump right in. Get on your hip waders. We're going in.
And get used to it for the next few episodes, for the rest of this chapter at least.
Seriously, yeah. 4 more episodes.
Yeah. I do want to make a quick note on Elrond's mode of speech. We talked about this a little bit last week.
Yeah.
This observation came from Tom Shippey. He said Elrond's speech is strongly marked by archaism, in particular by unusual use of word order. And this is something that's meant to mark him out as somebody who's very old and very wise.
Mm-hmm. Or at least very old. I mean, maybe that's why my sentences are sometimes of unusual use of word order.
Same reason Yoda talked with unusual use of word order.
I'm sure that's exactly what
Pretty sure Tolkien got the idea from Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, Sean.
Oh, people know I'm joking. Come on.
I know.
People know I'm joking.
All right. So let's take a look at the actual history. So we get, of course, the diminishment of the men of Westerness, their chief city, Innuminous Falls, the heirs of Valandil living at Fornas. Now, we're not going to talk about him yet. We will talk more about him later when Aragorn mentions it, but I wanted to mention that. Yeah.
Pretty big textual ruin for now, Valandil is.
Yeah, it's a very big textual ruin. Mm-hmm. And then we get that line, and their lordship passed. Now, that puts me in mind of that great line that was in the text and in the movie about Denethor talking about the house that's long bereft of lordship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We get a little bit later on with Boromir too, and Boromir says, you know, that the blood of Numenor is not totally waned, it's not totally gone, something like that.
Right.
So
yeah. And then of course there's that subtle mention of the Barrow Downs, the green mounds and the
green
grassy
mounds
hills,
and the grassy hills. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about a few chapters back in last season. So tell us a little bit about the South.
Well, so in the South we've got Gondor, and Gondor does recall somewhat the might of Numenor. We get a little bit about its high towers, its strong places,
right?
Its havens of many ships,
and then all the key cities.
Yep, Osgiliath, the citadel of the stars, I should say, was the chief city, and then flanking it on either side, if you're looking at the map, was Minas Ithil and Minas Anor, and the White
Tree, which
would later become Minas Morgul and Minas Tirith, respectively.
Right.
And then in Minas Anor, we've got the White Tree, the tree that came from Eresia originally. Or the seed.
The seed came from Eresia. Mm-hmm. And I've got a quote from Otrapata, or of the Rings of Power in the Third Age.
You love saying that, don't you?
I want to bring in. Who wouldn't like to say Otrapata? I mean, really. It doesn't flow as easily as Spabimi, but it's still kind of nice. So anyway. The White Tree was grown from the fruit of Nimloth the Fair that stood in the courts of the king at Armenelos in Numenor, ere Sauron burned it. And Nimloth was in its turn descended from the tree of Tirion. That was an image of the eldest of trees, White Telperion, which Yavanna caused to grow in the land of the Valar. The tree, memorial of the Eldar and of the light of Valinor, was planted in Minas Ithil before the house of Isildur, since he it was that had saved the fruit from destruction. And you've got a little bit on that particular saving, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I went back a little bit farther into the Akalabaith and actually got the story about how Isildur actually saved that fruit. So I'm going to read that.
Okay, fire away.
When Amandil heard rumor of the evil purpose of Sauron, he was grieved to the heart, knowing that in the end Sauron would surely have his will. Then he spoke to Elendil and the sons of Elendil, recalling the tale of the trees of Valinor. And Isildur said no word, but went out by night, and did a deed for which he was afterwards renowned. For he passed alone in disguise to Armenelos and to the courts of the king, which were now forbidden to the faithful. And he came to the place of the tree, which was forbidden to all by the orders of Sauron. And the tree was watched day and night by guards in his service. At that time Nimloth was dark and bore no bloom, for it was late in the autumn, and its winter was nigh. And Isildur passed through the guards and took from the tree a fruit that hung upon it, and turned to go. But the guard was aroused, and he was assailed, and fought his way out, receiving many wounds. And he escaped, and because he was disguised, it was not discovered who had laid hands on the tree. But Isildur came at last hardly back to Romenna, and delivered the fruit to the hands of Amandil, ere his strength failed him. Then the fruit was planted in secret, and it was blessed by Amandil, and a shoot arose from it, and sprouted in the spring. And Isildur was okay, too.
Well, that helps, yeah.
He survived, too, as folks will know.
Well, yeah, for a little while longer, at least.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I love that story.
Did a little damage on his way out, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Yes, he did. Oh, goodness. Let's not be too hard on the man.
Nope.
So we get, of course, that the line fails. This is in the part that we don't read, that the tree withers, the blood is mingled. So then we get the fact that, of course, Minas Ithil was taken, becoming Minas Morgul in Third Age 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Osgiliath was deserted. What do we get in the text? I think we get that it began to become deserted in 1640.
Third Age 1640, yeah.
But it took until 2475 for it to be ruined and the stone bridge broken.
Mm-hmm.
Over 800 years. Pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Osgiliath has been a ruin for a long time.
Yeah, it really has.
Minas Tirith has been the place, the chief city for a long time.
Yeah, it really has. But interestingly, that Osgiliath being deserted beginning in the Third Age, 1640, that's also the time that Mordor was left unguarded. The Tale of Years tells us that, and that by 1980, so 340 years later, the Witch King returned there and gathered the Nazgul, and it only took them 20 years after that
That's right.
to begin the siege of Minas Ithil. So
that's
a little
right.
timeline for you.
Right.
So Elrond, of course, explains, look, we're in danger now. The three that we're not going to talk about, that I'm wearing one, but I'm not going to tell anybody. Gandalf's wearing one. He's not going to tell anybody. I don't know why Galadriel's not here, but she's wearing the other one. In the meantime, we're all in danger because the one has been found. And that's where you're going to pick up, huh?
That's right, because in that, Elrond played small part,
Yes,
but not no part.
No. Small part. Not a very successful part,
Very small part.
as we'll find out.
Right.
His persuasive powers were lacking, yes.
He ceased, but at once Boromir stood up, tall and proud, before them. "Give me leave, Master Elrond," said he, "first to say more of Gondor, for verily from the land of Gondor I am come. And it would be well for all to know what passes there, for few, I deem, know of our deeds, and therefore guess little at their peril, if we should fail at last. Believe not that in the land of Gondor the blood of Numenor is spent, nor all its pride and dignity forgotten. By our valor the wild folk of the east are still restrained, and the terror of Morgul kept at bay. And thus alone are peace and freedom maintained in the lands behind us, bulwark of the west. But if the passages of the river should be won, what then? Yet that hour maybe is not now far away. The nameless enemy has arisen again. Smoke rises once more from Orad ruin that we call Mount Doom. The power of the Black Land grows, and we are hard beset.
That we call Mount Doom. They have such descriptive names for things, the men. What shall we call this place? We shall call it your land. We shall call it Mount Doom.
We should call it this land.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, Orad ruin that we call Mount Doom. It does kind of say it all.
It really does.
The Black Land.
Now, I want to go back to Shippey and that talk about Tolkien's use of modes of speech. He points out that Boromir and Aragorn, having common descent and both being men, he says, quote, ought to talk the same way. And boy, am I trying once again to not say this like he says it. Anytime you hear Tom, every time you read his words, you then hear them in his voice.
In his voice, absolutely.
They ought to talk the same way, but they do not quite. Boromir's speech is, from the beginning, relatively Elrondian, one might say. He uses words like verily and deem, and some inverted constructions. Later he'll say, Loth was my father to give me leave. We'll have more to say about Boromir when we compare him to Aragorn later.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good catch. I hadn't, I mean, yeah, certainly I pick up on some archaisms and some, just some different patterns in Boromir's speech. But to think about how Aragorn doesn't speak that way.
Or does, but only when he's talking to Boromir, as we'll find out. And I don't want to spoil that because it's really interesting to see. Boromir is really only capable of speaking this way. Aragorn, on the other hand, does have kind of a broader...
He kind of shifts.
He does.
Yeah, well, we'll
really
get to that in a bit.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, like you said, we get Mount Doom. We get, after this, we get the loss of Ithilien, which is just heartbreaking. It's such a beautiful, beautiful part of the land.
We get that, well, actually, in the passage that I read, we get that bit about the blood of Numenor not being spent. I mentioned that
that's
a moment ago.
Great
and,
line.
It's just a little mention of that, that ennoblement that the men of Gondor once had. Still a little bit there, not as much, but there is still some.
Nor all its pride and dignity forgotten, rather like us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we haven't yet forgotten our very small amounts of pride and dignity.
What pride and dignity we have left. I also wanted to point out something that I noticed in there about by our valor, the wild folk of the East are still restrained. And he's kind of, and we can all see Sean Bean doing this in the movie too. And it is in the book too. It's interesting how much it echoes a couple of things about Aragorn, though, which we will see later on. We're going to see Aragorn sort of respond to this and say, look, man, you guys aren't the only ones keeping all the evil at bay.
Well, but Boromir here, unlike film Boromir, who's making it sound like, hey, it's us alone that's keeping all of your lands free. Here he's saying the wild folk of the East are still restrained. I don't know. Who's he talking about?
Yeah, but he says, thus alone are peace and freedom maintaining the land behind us. He kind of makes it sound like all the danger is coming from the East, and they're like they're the rock it's all breaking on. Yeah.
He is a little bit.
It's not quite as proud and
arrogant.
Kind of, I was going to say like misinformed.
Yes, good way.
As it comes across in the movie, but there's definitely some of this.
It's oversold, that's for sure.
It is a bit oversold, yeah. And we'll get Aragorn's response to this later on. I think it's really great.
We will. But first, I'm going to get to his errand to Elrond. So I'm going to pick up a couple paragraphs later. And in this, we get the Isildur's Bane riddle. So here we go.
Oh, yeah.
In this evil hour, I've come on an errand over many dangerous leagues to Elrond. 110 days I have journeyed all alone. But I do not seek allies in war. The might of Elrond is in wisdom, not in weapons, it is said. I come to ask for counsel and the unraveling of hard words. For on the eve of the sudden assault, a dream came to my brother in a troubled sleep, and afterwards a like dream came off to him again, and once to me. In that dream I thought the eastern sky grew dark, and there was a growing thunder, but in the west a pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear, crying, Seek for the sword that was broken, in Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken stronger than Morgul spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's Bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand. Of these words we could understand little, and we spoke to our father, Denethor, lord of Minas Tirith, wise in the lore of Gondor. This only would he say, that Imladris was of old the name among the elves of a far northern dale, where Elrond the half-elven dwelt, greatest of lore-masters. Therefore my brother, seeing how desperate was our need, was eager to heed the dream and seek for Imladris. But since the way was full of doubt and danger, I took the journey upon myself. Loth was my father to give me leave, and long have I wandered by roads forgotten, seeking the house of Elrond, of which many had heard, but few knew where it lay.
There you go.
Man, 4 months journeying. Yeah.
That's a long trip, isn't it?
He left on the 4th of July and arrived on October 25th. That's a long time to be journeying.
It's a long trip. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It sure is.
Yeah.
And then we get Faramir's dream. Oh, man. Mm-hmm. He's not named here, by the way. It's just my brother, bro.
Just my brother.
Right.
Yeah. And worth noting that, Faramir had the dream a couple of times, but it did actually come
off to him. He got it several times.
That's true. I said a couple. It's really oft. It came to him
many times.
A bunch of times, and it came to Boromir once.
There's something special about Faramir in that regard, isn't there? Remember, he also got that dream about the wave, the destruction of Numenor.
Yeah, the so-called
one that Tolkien
Atlantis
himself
dream,
had, the recurring dream that Tolkien had.
Yeah, the Numenor dream, I guess we can call it in universe. Yeah.
Atalante
Tolkien,
dream.
Tolkien kind of referred to it as the Atlantis dream or the Atlantean dream. Yeah.
Right. But not the Atlanta dream. This is not,
No. Georgia was not on his mind.
Georgia.
It's interesting that, because whoever is sending this dream, whether it's Irmo Lorien,
that's exactly
what
I'm thinking,
directly from Iluvatar, or, one of the Valar sending it on his behalf, it's going to Faramir a bunch of times.
Yeah.
It's, the powers are really trying to get this message across to Faramir, as if to say, hey, can you go? Hey, why don't you be the one to go? And it ends up, and after he doesn't go, eventually Boromir goes.
Yeah.
And they send the dream to Boromir once, I guess, to make sure somebody goes.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So I think there's definitely something to that, to the fact that the Valar sent this dream to Faramir a bunch of times.
Yeah, and only to Boromir once.
Boromir and seeing some, yeah.
And you kind of wonder, how sometimes you might have a dream because somebody's told you about their dream? Like, you kind of wonder, did Boromir just have this dream because Faramir's told him about it 100 times?
Oh, no, I don't think
I'm kidding.
I think it's a matter of, they finally sent it to Boromir.
Right. They were like, look, we know Denethor's never going to send Faramir.
Right.
So, yeah.
I want to go back to Tom Shippey again, this time not on modes of speech, but on one of our repeating themes, fate and free will. because he actually has something to say about this dream in The Road to Middle-earth. He says, "In Middle-earth, one may say, Providence or the Valar sent the dream that took Boromir to Rivendell. But they sent it first and most often to Faramir, who would no doubt have been a better choice.
Mm-hmm.
It was human decision, or human perversity, which led to Boromir claiming the journey. With what chain of ill effects and causalities no one can tell. Luck, then, is a continuous interplay of providence and free will, a blending of so many factors that the mind cannot disentangle them."
Well, that is well said.
I think he's saying much better than I could have said, kind of what I'm thinking is, everything that happens because Boromir ends up, taking this journey instead of Faramir.
Right. My goodness.
And that's really interesting.
And yet it's still, the mission is still eventually accomplished. Spoiler alert.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, it's that whole thing of fate or free will, and the answer is yes, because it is both.
And the mission ends up being accomplished in the way it had to be. I mean, we'll
absolutely.
obviously get to this near the end of the season, but, there's, when you look back at it in hindsight, things could only have played out the way they did, I think.
Right.
The Fellowship.
Frodo and the whole Fellowship could not have tried
on.
to get onto the other side and go through the Emyn Muil and, the 9 of them trying to get into Mordor.
Yeah.
No.
Can you imagine Pippin, crawling up
through the dead marshes and crawling up the no.
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
He can not handle
I'm not picking on Pippin. I can't see Legolas doing it either.
Well, yeah. I mean, he is a strange elf.
I actually want to say something else about Boromir taking this journey, despite the fact that the way was full of doubt and danger.
Right.
I think we talked about this last time, didn't we, with Corey? We talked about the fact that, it wasn't just the way that was dangerous. Actually, Rivendell itself is a dangerous place for a mortal to visit.
It's not just the journey, but the destination. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So folks, go back and listen to that again.
And then, of course, Denethor's decision, the fact that he's not going to send Faramir because he thinks Boromir's the one who's, more likely to actually get the job done. We'll get to that, later down the line, much later, in terms of...
And all its ramifications.
Exactly.
And all the baggage that led to that decision. On
that's what I was thinking, was all the baggage indeed, yeah. So I'm actually going to take the next passage. I don't normally alternate things, but I wanted to make sure that that Sean got Bilbo's poem about Aragorn. So I'm actually taking the next bit to get there.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you.
Well, I try. "And here in the House of Elrond, more shall be made clear to you," said Aragorn, standing up. He cast his sword upon the table that stood before Elrond, and the blade was in 2 pieces. "Here is the sword that was broken," he said. "And who are you, and what have you to do with Minas Tirith?" asked Boromir, looking in wonder at the lean face of the ranger and his weather-stained cloak. "He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn," said Elrond, "and he is descended through many fathers from Isildur, Elendil's son of Minas Ithil. He is the chief of the Dunedain in the north, and few are now left of that folk." "Then it belongs to you and not to me at all," cried Frodo in amazement, springing to his feet, as if he expected the ring to be demanded at once. "It does not belong to either of us," said Aragorn, "but it has been ordained that you should hold it for a while." "Bring out the ring, Frodo," said Gandalf solemnly. "The time has come. Hold it up, and then Boromir will understand the remainder of his riddle."
Aragorn, clearly a Lionel Richie fan. "Hello?"
Yeah, puts the sword down and says,
"Is it
hello?
me you're looking for?"
Oh, gosh, he had to sing again. Oh, Sean.
Come on. I mean,
what are you trying to do
that's
to
totally
us,
the
man?
song that's playing in his head.
That is. That's exactly what's playing. Hello. Is it me you're looking for? I believe it is, yes.
I'm your guy. Right here. Here's my sword. Boom.
Yeah, that's right.
Right there.
Yeah, boom. Bring it.
As good as a mic
Bring
drop.
it.
It's a sword drop. It's a shard drop.
It's a sword drop. A broken sword drop. Right.
Boom.
All right.
And unlike the film version, where Legolas is the one who stands up and says, what's the line in the movie? "He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn. You owe him your allegiance." And Aragorn is like, dude, wait, hang on. Just chill.
Sit down, Legolas.
Sit down, Legolas, he says in Sindarin, I believe.
Yeah. I can't remember. Havadad or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. The book actually has Aragorn doing this, kind of standing up and saying, "Look, this is me, dude, right here. Here's my sword.
Yeah.
This is what you're looking for.
This is my sword. This proves who I am."
And then Elrond sort of, after the fact, points out, "Yes, by the way, this is Aragorn, son of Arathorn."
Exactly.
Answering the question.
He is descended from yeah, exactly. Right. By the way, I've always been curious in the film version, how would a Mirkwood elf know that Boromir would owe Aragorn his allegiance anyway? I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem, I suppose it could be common knowledge, but yeah, it doesn't seem like it's something he should be intimately aware of. Yeah.
or even care about, frankly.
That's
I mean,
true,
like
yeah.
we heard from who was the elf that mentioned it, that, you know, one mortal sounds very much like another. You know, saying of Bilbo and Aragorn, we couldn't tell which was your part and which was his.
That's true. And Legolas is one of those Mirkwood elves who are more dangerous and less wise. So
right. And strange.
So, right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I guess they needed to give him some sort of gravitas in the film, but you know.
But this is one of those classic examples, isn't it, of the difference in Aragorn from the book to the movie.
Yes.
And while this
is a confident man who knows his identity, and he's absolutely got no problem making it clear who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet he's still humble about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think is so great about it. You know, our purpose in bringing this stuff up is not, you know, to bash the movies. It's just to show that this Aragorn is really a very different, very, like you said, confident and yet still humble. He's a leader of men, and he knows it.
Yeah, he is.
So, and
he knows it, and he doesn't shy away from it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no questioning of, you know, I don't really know if I want to do this. Am I going to be the one who's worthy to lead? You know, no, there's none of that. None of that with Aragorn here.
None of that. No hesitation, very little doubt, but still a little bit of humility. You know, when he responds to Frodo, it doesn't belong to either of us.
Right.
You can just see him kind of turning to Frodo and just saying, you know, no, I'm not, you know, I'm not asking for the ring.
By the way, it was Isildur claiming this ring that kind of started all this. So no, thank you.
I'm not doing
I'm
that.
good.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm glad you brought it out, Frodo. This I shall have as weregild from my great.
Thanks a lot. I was looking for some weregild. I like that he says it has been ordained that you should hold it.
Where's the weregild? There's the weregild.
Weregild.
Where's the guild? Weregild.
Their guild.
Their guild.
Their castle.
Why are you talking that way?
But
oh no!
But you know, he's got this bit about it's been ordained that you should hold it for a while. You know,
yes,
I like that. We talked about this last time with Elrond talking about how everyone had been called here, and Aragorn is hinting at that again here. You know, there's a plan here. Let's just trust it. Let's kind of follow the plan. You've got it. You're meant to have it. Let's let you have it.
And then, of course, Gandalf with his usual, let's get down to business. It's time to go ahead and bring out the ring and let's get going on what's happening. And that's where you're going to pick up.
Bring out your ring.
Oh, no.
Bring out your ring. Here we go.
I'm not melted yet.
I feel precious. There was a hush, and all turned their eyes on Frodo. He was shaken by a sudden shame and fear, and he felt a great reluctance to reveal the ring and a loathing of its touch. He wished he was far away. The ring gleamed and flickered as he held it up before them in his trembling hand. "Behold Isildur's bane," said Elrond. Boromir's eyes glinted as he gazed at the golden thing. "The halfling," he muttered. "Is then the doom of Minas Tirith come at last? But why then should we seek a broken sword?" "The words were not the doom of Minas Tirith," said Aragorn, "but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. For the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil that broke beneath him when he fell. It has been treasured by his heirs when all other heirlooms were lost, for it was spoken of old among us that it should be made again when the ring, Isildur's bane, was found. Now you have seen the sword that you have sought. What would you ask? Do you wish for the house of Elendil to return to the land of Gondor?" "I was not sent to beg any boon, but to seek only the meaning of a riddle," answered Boromir proudly. "Yet we are hard-pressed, and the sword of Elendil would be a help beyond our hope, if such a thing could indeed return out of the shadows of the past." He looked again at Aragorn, and doubt was in his eyes. Frodo felt Bilbo stir impatiently at his side. Evidently he was annoyed on his friend's behalf. Standing suddenly up, he burst out, "All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king." Not very good, perhaps, but to the point, if you need more beyond the word of Elrond. If that was worth the journey of 110 days to hear, you had best listen to it. He sat down with a snort.
Of course he did. It's Bilbo.
Of course. That's the most hobbitish response possible.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. He's all ticked off.
I mean, aside from the fact that it's in poetry.
Stand up, poetry.
Yeah. And a snort.
Exactly. Oh, man. There's some interesting little bits here that are worth pulling out, really. We get first, of course, Boromir's misunderstanding of what it means, the doom of Minas Tirith, instead of just doom,
right?
Like Aragorn clarifies. It's like everybody needs to go back to school to learn what doom means.
Yeah, there's doom and there's doom, if you understand me.
Right.
Yeah, this isn't the bad doom. This isn't the final end of Minas Tirith. We talked about this last episode. This isn't,
right. Doom and deem. This is the doom that we must deem. Right. Yeah, exactly.
This is fate. This is deeming. This is big stuff happening.
Right, exactly.
What about the language when Frodo first takes out the ring? He's got this reluctance to take out the ring. And and a shame and a fear and a loathing of its touch. I mean, this is definite ring at work stuff here, isn't it?
Oh, no doubt. The ring itself doesn't want to be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
It wants to stay in his pocket.
Yeah.
It wants to stay in his pockets, is precious.
Yeah. And Frodo even loathes its touch too, which is interesting. I think there's some reluctance on his part too, I think. He doesn't even want to touch the ring.
That might even be the ring basically saying, you don't want to touch me, let me go.
Oh, that could be.
Keep me in your pocket.
That could be. I didn't read it that way.
I'm going to feel like cheap corduroy, and it's going to make you want to drop me back.
It's not going to feel good. That sounds pretty on brand for the ring, but I actually just read it as actually being Frodo just sort of hating the pull of the ring on him already. It's probably a little both, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But it is interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And then we get, of course, the story about the Sword of Elendil, which is great. I think we all know that. Mm-hmm. And we get that awesome question that he asks.
It's a bold question.
Boy, you're not kidding.
Do you want your king to return? Do you want the House of Elendil to come back? In front of all these people.
Yeah, I mean, flat out, do you want the House of Elendil to return? Do you want your king back? And Boromir's kind of shaken by it, I think.
Do you want me to come back to your place?
Yeah, let's not go there.
The Hungarian sketch. Come on, the Hungarian Facebook sketch.
I know the Hungarian sketch. I know.
All right.
If I said you had a beautiful body,
exactly,
would you hold it against me?
Exactly.
I am no longer infected.
See, that's the one.
I know. That doesn't mean I'm going to leave it in the show.
Okay.
So Boromir's response, though, super proud and super doubtful and incredibly evasive. He sounds like a politician right here. What's the question? Do you want your king to come back? His answer is, I'm not looking for a gift. I just want the answer to a question. And then when he does say something about it, we are hard pressed. We could use a little help. The sword would be a help. Not the king, the sword.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right? Not the king. The sword is all he wants. If such a thing
could return.
Not a person could have turned out of the shadows of the past.
That is a good catch. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. It's not the house he wants. It's just the sword.
But the sword would be helpful, which is interesting.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And then, of course, obviously, Bilbo's poem, which we just talked about. Great stuff, though.
Yeah.
And, of course, we talked that poem before, back when it was used to identify Strider.
Mm-hmm. Back at the Prancing Pony, yeah.
In the titular chapter, I believe, Strider.
I think so, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love Bilbo's just indignation at all of this and, annoyed on his friend's behalf. Yeah. I love that. It's such a great Bilbo moment. It's him.
And even the self-effacing humor. Oh, look, it's not a very good poem, but it really is to the point. If you need more than Elrond's word.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's a little, giving a little attitude to that cheeky youngster Boromir.
That cheeky youngster. Absolutely right. Well, after he chats a little bit with Frodo about the origins of that poem, Aragorn comes back in, and that's where I'm going to pick up. Aragorn smiled at him. Then he turned to Boromir again. For my part, I forgive your doubt, he said. Little do I resemble the figures of Elendil and Isildur as they stand carven in their majesty in the halls of Denethor. I am but the heir of Isildur, not Isildur himself. I have had a hard life and a long, and the leagues that lie between here and Gondor are a small part in the count of my journeys. I have crossed many mountains and many rivers and trodden many plains, even into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, where the stars are strange. But my home, such as I have, is in the north, for here the heirs of Elendil have ever dwelt in long line unbroken, from father unto son, for many generations. Our days have darkened, and we have dwindled, but ever the sword has passed to a new keeper. And this I will say to you, Boromir, ere I end. Lonely men are we, rangers of the wild, hunters, but hunters ever are the servants of the enemy, for they are found in many places, not in Mordor only. If Gondor, Boromir, has been a stalwart tower, We have played another part. Many evil things there that your strong walls and bright swords do not stay. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, do you say? The North would have known them little but for us. Fear would have destroyed them. But when dark things come from the houseless hills, or creep from sunless woods, they fly from us. What roads would any dare to tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands, or in the homes of simple men at night, if the Dunedain were asleep, or were all gone to the grave? And yet less thanks have we than you. Travelers scowl at us, and countrymen give us scornful names. Strider I am, to one fat man who lives within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart, or lay his little town in ruin, if he were not guarded ceaselessly. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. That has been the task of my kindred, while the years have lengthened and the grass has grown. But now the world is changing once again. A new hour comes. Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged. I will come to Minas Tirith. Okay.
Wow.
Wow, that last paragraph, reading it aloud, gave me chills.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite parataxis, right? But it's super short, choppy sentences.
Yeah.
World is changing.
Yeah, it is.
New hour comes.
It's
Isildur's
very
bane,
determined.
Battle, sword, I'm coming.
There's a lot of very short declarative sentences of, here's what's going on. Here's what I'm going to do.
It's absolute.
Yeah.
Yeah. No room for argument here. It's like he's finally coming to that conclusion himself right now. What was a question before is now a decisive statement.
Right. It's no longer, do you want me to come? It's now,
I'm not waiting
going.
for your opinion. I'm not waiting for your question. This is the time. Absolutely.
This whole passage that you just read, at the risk of stepping on one of your usual lines, there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, there's a ton to chew up, isn't there?
But we said we'd come back to Shippy again and Aragorn's speech, and I think this is a perfect place for it. Shippy points out that Aragorn actually can speak somewhat archaically, the way Boromir does, but he correctly notices that he tends to do it most when he is speaking directly to Boromir, as if to impress him. He is also capable of speaking quite colloquially, as in his reference to Butterbur. Colloquially, a little bit of body shaming, I guess. Boromir does not say things like one fat man, and shows no sign of knowing anyone of Butterbur's social status.
Right.
Later, Shippy points out these differences between them remind us, in miniature, that Aragorn is also Strider, and does not need to be on his dignity all the time. But at the same time that Strider is also Aragorn, and can claim just as much, indeed even more authority than Boromir.
Boy.
And it's a really great observation about the power of language. And this should not surprise us coming from Tolkien, the philologist, that, the way people speak is a marker of identity.
It identifies so much about them, right?
Yeah, we talked about
this. And it doesn't surprise me that Shippy's the one to pick this out either, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And this is great because this might be the first time that we're really seeing it explained how a character uses different registers of language as a tool, as a tool of statecraft or a tool of leadership.
Yeah.
And
I think we see Gandalf doing that a few times as well. We'll probably catch a little bit of that.
Yeah, probably so.
I can think of a few moments that make me think that way, but this is really clear. And to see Aragorn shift from talking colloquially, like Shippy says about Butterbur, and clearly Boromir wouldn't even use a phrase like that. So,
well, and I also, again, when Aragorn says, one fat man who lives within a day's march of these horrible things, I mean, he's a little bitter there, isn't he?
Oh, I think he's ticked. Yeah.
There's colloquialism, but it's also just like he's frustrated because he's been treated like this by the people of Bree.
Yeah.
They don't recognize all the things that they've done for them, which is also mentioned in this passage. But
then he recognizes that and is like, look, it can't be any other way.
Right.
We would not have it otherwise.
That's
and
right.
what a line that is. That next sentence, if simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be.
They will be. And we must be
They
secret
will
to
be
keep
naive.
them so.
They will be sheltered and protected. But that's our job, and we got to keep ourselves secret to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why there's just so much there. And this is why this is the passage I was talking about earlier when I said, Boromir has his, hey, if it weren't for us, you guys would be in so much trouble. This is Aragorn's.
And you don't know, man.
You have no idea.
You don't even know.
Yeah.
No clue.
Right.
No clue at all.
And I do love that.
And yet, he's gracious to Boromir. I forgive your doubt.
That's true. Yeah.
But it's funny because he talks about that like, oh, I don't look like these guys. But let's skip ahead a little bit to Book 6, Chapter 5, The Steward and the King. It's a little preview. Aragorn may be a little shaggy now. I mean, maybe he needs to trim that beard. Maybe he needs to get a little haircut. But after his coronation, check this out. But when Aragorn arose, all that beheld him gazed in silence, for it seemed to them that he was revealed to them now for the first time. Tall as the sea kings of old, he stood above all that were near. Ancient of days he seemed, and yet in the flower of manhood. And wisdom sat upon his brow, and strength and healing were in his hands, and a light was about him. Oh, yeah. I mean,
that's when Arwen said, see, Daddy, I told you he cleaned up nice.
There you go. That's right. Okay, honey, you can marry him.
Yep. Yeah. And I love, we've got this reminder how far Aragorn has traveled, where stars are strange. I love that.
Yeah.
I just love that expression.
That tells us just how far that is, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I always love it when the stars are mentioned, especially when they don't have to be, little reminders that Varda's always there.
Yeah.
But I want to go to Appendix A to hear a little bit about some of these journeys. That appendix tells us that his ways were hard and long, and he became somewhat grim to look upon, unless he chanced to smile. And yet he seemed to men worthy of honor, as a king that is in exile. Well, there you go. When he did not hide his true shape. For he went in many guises, and won renown under many names. He rode in the host of the Rohirrim, and fought for the Lord of Gondor by land and by sea. And then in the hour of victory he passed out of the knowledge of men of the West, and went alone far into the east and deep into the south, exploring the hearts of men, both evil and good, and uncovering the plots and devices of the servants of Sauron.
Yeah, he's been a busy man.
He has been a very busy man, and I love the last part of that, because it's not just about all the battles he's fought and all the leaders he's served. It's about...
No, absolutely not.
He's traveled and he's studied people. He's explored the hearts of men. He's learned
He's gathering intelligence.
He is gathering intelligence, and I think he's also learning about people. I think he's trying to learn more to become to become the ruler that he knows he should be someday.
The leader of men.
I think that's cool. But you're right. There's also very clearly gathering intelligence about the plots and devices of Sauron's servants.
Right. Exactly.
Really cool stuff.
And I told you that we would revisit Valandil, and that's where we're going to do that now, because he mentions earlier that the heirs of Valandil have ever dwelt in Long Line Unbroken here in the north. So Valandil was Isildur's youngest son. When his wife was pregnant with him, she was sent to Rivendell before the War of the Last Alliance, and he would be born there in Second Age 3430. So he was 13 when his father and brothers died in the disaster of the Gladden Fields. He would become king at the age of 21, in Third Age 10, and he would rule for 239 years.
That's right. And his name is Quenya, for a friend of the Valar. You get that Indil suffix
Valandil,
again.
yeah.
Yeah, Vala, Indil. And that Indil suffix is the one that means friend, means lover of, but specifically with the notion of friendship or love or devotion to something for its own sake.
Right, exactly. So then, of course, like we talked about, Aragorn makes the decision. This is not an unsure man. This is not a doubting man. This is a very confident, certain, he knows what needs to be done, and he's going to do it.
He knows what needs to be done, and he is ready to do it. He has now made up his mind to do it.
Right, exactly.
And I also like that I just want to briefly mention that one of the things he points out is the sword shall be reforged, which, remember, we've talked about the interplay of free will and prophecy. Not just free will and fate, but free will and prophecy. This is, it is prophesized that this will happen, but I'm going to make it happen now.
Yeah, it's time. This is the time.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, we get the passage next that we're not going to read, and this is when, Boromir's like, "What is it really the ring?" Elrond's like, "We'll get to that." Bilbo, it's you want to get to eat, you want to have some lunch, tell your story. So
a little bit more of the joking around.
I love that, the little banter back and forth. This is Elrond, folks, and Bilbo's like kind of teasing with him a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. And so Bilbo finally comes clean, right? With,
absolutely.
Telling the true story. He gives this little sidelong glance to Glóin.
Right.
And
don't give me a hard time, man.
And I want to point out that, when this book was published in 1954, I think, some readers would only have been familiar with the false story because that was the version that was published in the first edition.
That's
of the
true.
Hobbit, right?
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So I think it's hard for us, I think, sometimes as readers of the updated version of The Hobbit to remember the effect that the revised version in Lord of the Rings would have had on people. But I think this might be a subtle nod to those readers to go back and get an updated edition of The Hobbit to get the real story.
Exactly.
Since it's
you
not
still have a
given
first
here.
edition, but give that thing to charity and go buy a new one. No,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
hold
Don't
on
give it to
that
charity.
first one. Exactly.
Give it to us. Give it to my co-host.
There you go. Put it on my shelf. All right.
Yeah.
You're going to go ahead and pick up from there, right?
Yes, then Bilbo goes ahead, and I'll pick up there. To some there, Bilbo's tale was wholly new, and they listened with amazement while the old hobbit, actually not at all displeased, recounted his adventure with Gollum at full length. He did not omit a single riddle. He would have given also an account of his party and disappearance from the Shire if he had been allowed, but Elrond raised his hand. "Well told, my friend," he said, "but that is enough at this time. For the moment it suffices to know that the ring passed to Frodo, your heir. Let him now speak." Then, less willingly than Bilbo, Frodo told of all his dealings with the ring from the day that it passed into his keeping. Every step of his journey from Hobbiton to the ford of Bruinen was questioned and considered, and everything that he could recall concerning the Black Riders was examined. At last he sat down again. "Not bad," Bilbo said to him. "You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it all again together sometime if I am to write it up. There are whole chapters of stuff before you ever got here." "Yes, it made quite a long tale," answered Frodo. "But the story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf."
We always want to know about Gandalf. I mean, really, don't we? He's always the mysterious guy with the mysterious stuff happening. So
Always coming and going and going and coming.
I suppose there's not a lot here to really discuss, but it was definitely a section we wanted to read. The question about the Black Riders, I think, is something I wanted to highlight, right? That's really important stuff.
Yeah. I think it's worth pointing out Frodo's relative unwillingness to talk.
Oh,
He
yeah.
doesn't really want to talk about this. I think this is more of the ring at work.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it's we talked a moment ago about that shame and that reluctance to bring out the ring, and I think he's reluctant to talk about the ring.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also a little bit of that, when he first woke up and he realized, Gandalf was teasing him about the absurd things he'd done. And Frodo's, I'm not going to argue. You're right. I made some really poor decisions. And I think he realized his choices were going to get, really carefully looked at.
Criticized.
His actions were going to be dissected, and everything that he did. And, he didn't want to talk about, cow jumped over the moon, and he did not want to go there, That was a pretty big, stupid mix-up, and he shouldn't have done it, and he knows it. So I don't think he wanted to talk about that, but at least we didn't have to hear it.
That's true. Time. Yeah, nobody wants to have to relive their, when they realize they've made mistakes. Yeah. They don't want to have to relive.
Nobody wants to point out that they were at a party wearing a lampshade, and doing karaoke to, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know because I've never done that. I'm just saying.
No, of course.
Of course not. I don't.
Not in an audience that's a lot like a panel job interview.
No.
I mean, he's not actually interviewing for the position of ring bearer here, but
he is the incumbent.
Stature of the people. That,
he is the incumbent. So
that's true. That is true, and just the stature of the people that he's talking, like all these wise and powerful people
who've been around for thousands of years.
Do I have to explain to the son of Eärendil why I put the ring on at Weathertop? Oh man, that's not going to go well.
Oh no, it's not going to go well. Not going to go well at all. I also like, though, Bilbo's response, this kind of meta stuff about the book, huh?
Very meta, this idea that it made a good story, or would have if it weren't for the interruptions.
Whole chapters, and I took notes.
Much like this podcast, actually.
It would have made a good story if we hadn't kept interrupting each other, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This idea of whole chapters of stuff before we ever got here. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we've just read
we just read a whole season on it. That's exactly right.
This is all a reference to the frame narrative and the idea that, this story that Bilbo is sort of threatening to write, or promising to write, however you look at it, is the book that we're reading, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely.
Someone actually recently suggested to me by email or on Facebook, I can't remember, but somebody suggested that Bilbo must have written book one, because that's all the stuff that Frodo would have told him at Rivendell.
Interesting. And it certainly would go with the style changes we've talked about.
Exactly. That's exactly it, because we've been talking about that difference in tone.
Right, that tone.
And how book one is more like The Hobbit. Yep. And I thought that was a really cool observation. I can't recall who said it. I'll try and I'll try and dig
that's
that
worthy of a
bring
hat
it
tip
up
for
the
sure.
next episode.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, now that they've shared their tale, we're hoping that they're going to get something to eat. I think Elrond just lied to Bilbo, basically. Tell your story, then we can get something to eat. But that isn't what happens next. They don't get lunch and a nice pie. They have to move on to Galdor's story. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and pick up there. Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. "You speak for me also," he cried. And turning to Elrond, he said, "The wise may have good reason to believe that the Halfling's Trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely though that may seem to those who know less. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would ask this also, what of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel, if he knows the things that we have heard?" "The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together," said Elrond. "I had not overlooked them, and they shall be answered. But these things it is the part of Gandalf to make clear, and I call upon him last, for it is the place of honor, and in all this matter he has been the chief." "Some, Galdor," said Gandalf, "would think the tidings of Glóin and the pursuit of Frodo proof enough. The Halfling's Trove is a thing of great worth to the enemy. Yet it is a ring. What then? The 9 the Nazgul keep. The 7 are taken or destroyed." At this Glóin stirred but did not speak. "The 3 we know of. What then is this one that he desires so much?" We'll actually stop there for now, because there's so much.
Before we move on,
yes,
there is a lot to say there, starting with Elrond as committee chair and his very effective use of "let's hold all questions until the end," Galdor.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
It really is what that is. Let's put that in the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're going to table that for later.
Yeah, exactly. Please keep your hands down. You can ask questions at the end. Gandalf's next.
Yeah.
It's his spot in the presentation. Yeah. Let's load his PowerPoint.
Right.
All right, Gandalf, you're next.
Exactly. Yeah, Gandalf's got the next few slides.
Oh, goodness.
Who wants to drive the webinar?
Oh, man. I'm having flashbacks of all the bad business meetings I used to have before I was self-employed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot more lore here. We've gotten a whole lot of lore already, and we're going to get more.
Yeah. 3 more episodes of lore even after this. That's right.
Quite a bit. Yep. Quite a bit.
Hope y'all like lore. Hope y'all like lore, because this is a massive 5-episode.
Lore. We've got lore here at the Council of Elrond.
It's a lore dump. It is a lore dump for 5 episodes.
It's a whole lot of lore.
That's right.
I want to go back to Tom Shippey because Tom Shippey has some things to say.
Right, exactly.
Because it's Tom Shippey, and he, as always, has interesting things to say. Here about Gandalf, going back to this really cool concept of these different modes of speech. But with Gandalf, it's less about his words and more about the speakers whom he directly quotes. Yeah. So we'll be talking about some of those as they come up.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. So Galdor's questions actually are pretty valid, right? What is the evidence? What are the proofs? And hey, I've heard this Saruman guy knows a lot about rings. What does he have to say? Mm-hmm. Elrond segues straight to Gandalf's introduction, and Gandalf begins, as he usually does, straight to business. Starts out with that deductive reasoning. Look, we know it's a thing of great worth. We know it's a ring. We know it's not one of the 9, and we know it's not one of the 7, and we know it's not one of the 3, which we know of but aren't going to talk about, which always amazes me. But yeah, never mind.
Let's move past the 3.
We're not going to talk about the 3. We're not going to. First rule of the 3 is don't talk about the 3.
Don't talk about the 3.
Yeah.
Didn't we discuss with Corey last time the 7, that Gandalf doesn't really know for sure that the 7 are all taken or destroyed? He's kind of making an educated guess there.
Yeah, he wouldn't know. That's true. That's right. That was what we talked about with Corey. He didn't go around and talk to all the dragons. Excuse me, Mr. Dragon.
Excuse me, have you eaten any rings lately?
Yeah, have you eaten any rings?
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, we can assume that it's accurate, but we don't know for sure. Gandalf doesn't know for sure. But I mean, I guess the idea is that they're all accounted for.
One way or the other.
The 7 houses of the dwarves don't have them.
Right.
So I guess that's the most important
They're either
thing.
taken or they are in dragon hordes or in dragons. One or the other. Yeah.
Right. This is probably a good place to point out some word nerdery that we've got from Hammond
Always.
and Scull. That
Pretty much any time in our show is a good time to point out word nerdery.
Oh, well, yeah. You don't have to tell me. Since this is the first time that we see the mention of the name Nazgul, which I know is hard to believe because we've been saying it since the very beginning just because we know who they are. But this is the first time that the name Nazgul appears in the text. And Hammond and Scull do have some cool word nerdery here. They say, in drafts to a letter to a Mr. Rang, which is published as number 297 in Carpenter's collection, Tolkien talks about this word Nazg and explains that it is the word for ring in the Black speech. He goes on to say that he intended this to be a vocable, that's a word, especially with reference to form rather than meaning, as distinct in style and phonetic content from words of the same meaning in Elvish or in other real languages that are most familiar. So basically, he's trying to make this word sound unfamiliar in the context of a native English speaker or someone who's been reading all the Elvish names in this book. He then observes that it remains remarkable that Nask, that's N-A-S-C, is the word for ring in Gaelic. It also fits well in meaning, since it also means, and probably originally meant, a bond, and can be used for an obligation. He says that he was not, at the time of making use of this word, aware of borrowing, but acknowledges that it was probable, but by no means certain, that the name is nonetheless an echo. Although, to be clear, he's not a fan. He says that, I have no liking at all for Gaelic from Old Irish downwards as a language, but it is, of course, of great historical and philological interest, and I have at various times studied it, with, alas, very little success.
Well, if you don't like it, there's a good reason.
You and me both, Professor. And when I say you and me both, I mean no success at studying.
I was going to say, I don't know that you know enough about Gaelic to decide whether you like it.
No, but I love the sound of it. I will say that.
I was going to say, I do too, actually. I just know nothing of the language, right?
Right. Moving back to the professor's quote here. It is thus probable that Nas is actually derived from it, and this short, hard, and clear vocable, sticking out from what seems to me, an unloving alien, a mushy language, became lodged in some corner of my linguistic memory.
Tell us what you really think, Professor. I mean,
I know, right?
One of those, he does not
I don't like
words.
it. It's mushy. Yeah. I think Gaelic sounds beautiful, Professor.
I know, it's musical and lovely.
But I don't really know it.
So. I don't know language well enough to know. Oh, goodness, yeah. So Hammond and Scull also point out this is the only time where it seems to be suggested that the Nazgul hold their own rings, right? The 9, the Nazgul keep. But we have a few other occurrences that make it seem like this is really an error or an oversight. We have the 9, he has gathered to himself, talking about Sauron, in the shadow of the past. We have the fact that the Nazgul, quote, were entirely enslaved to their 9 rings, which he now himself held, again, talking about Sauron. And then we have a letter number 264 in which Tolkien writes that Sauron held the 9 rings, giving him primary control of the wills of the Nazgul. So,
and folks who listened to last season may remember me getting tripped up on this passage and thinking that the nine actually had their own had their own rings.
And it's understandable why you'd think that, but when you look at the collection of evidence, it seems clear Sauron has them. So.
Yeah, and this is just a quote by Gandalf.
Right.
Gandalf is not 100% accurate on everything he says, as much as we'd like him to be. Yep. So then, going on to this passage that we're not going to read, we get this, this mention of this wide gap in time and in knowledge, right, between when it was lost in the river and when Bilbo found it under the mountain, and waste of time. I think a wide waste of time is such a powerful way of saying that.
I agree.
But I think that's as good a time as any for me to go ahead and pick up with the following paragraph.
Yeah.
Some here will remember that many years ago I myself dared to pass the doors of the necromancer in Dol Guldur, and secretly explored his ways, and found thus that our fears were true. He was none other than Sauron, our enemy of old, at length taking shape and power again. Some, too, will remember also that Saruman dissuaded us from open deeds against him, and for long we watched him only. Yet at last, as his shadow grew, Saruman yielded, and the council put forth its strength and drove the evil out of Mirkwood. And that was in the very year of the finding of this ring. A strange chance, if chance it was. But we were too late, as Elrond foresaw. Sauron also had watched us, and had long prepared against our stroke, governing Mordor from afar through Minas Morgul, where his 9 servants dwelt, until all was ready. Then he gave way before us, but only feigned to flee, and soon after came to the Dark Tower and openly declared himself. Then, for the last time, the council met, for now we learned that he was seeking ever more eagerly for the One. We feared then that he had some news of it that we knew nothing of, but Saruman said nay, and repeated what he had said to us before, that the One would never again be found in Middle-earth. At the worst, said he, our enemy knows that we have it not, and that it still is lost. But what was lost may yet be found, he thinks. Fear not, his hope will cheat him. Have I not earnestly studied this matter? Into Anduin the Great it fell, and long ago, while Sauron slept, it was rolled down the river to the sea. There let it lie until the end.
Or let it lie until I find it. But, we'll get to that. Sauron,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
In case you weren't sure, he had an ulterior motive.
Right.
and,
He
and
wasn't
them not
really
looking
trying to
for
pull
it.
anything
Yeah.
off here.
Yeah. Don't worry about it, guys. It's fine.
I'm sure it's gone down the river. Let it lie. Let it lie. Let it lie. That's all I'm saying.
Lie.
Anyway, so let's get a little timeline action here. The visit was in Third Age 2850. The White Council wouldn't attack until 2941, so almost 100 years later. And now it's 3018, so it's another, almost 80 years after the attack. But interestingly, the Tale of Years says that Gandalf also visited much earlier, in Third Age 2063, almost 800 years before he visited it this time. This was,
yeah.
I know. I was like, are you kidding me? There's that big of a gap. That was when the wise had feared that the power of Dol Guldur might have been Sauron. But that time, Sauron retreated and hid in the east. And that's when the watchful peace began. And the Nazgul remained quiet in Minas Morgul, which they had taken over about 60 years earlier in Third Age 2002, like we mentioned earlier. Interesting timeline. When you look at it from that
Cold War,
kind of get that 30,000 foot view, and you start to see that the movements of Sauron and the Nazgul, and you realize just how long this took.
Yeah. How long they were watching and waiting. How long this foreboding sense of things getting worse was with the wise.
Yeah. Every step he takes, every move he makes, they'll be watching him.
They'd be watching him.
Absolutely. Notice, though, I did not make the error of actually singing that song. I just want that noted for the record, sir.
No. We also didn't compare the singer of that song to a certain sword.
No, we did not. Gordon Sumner on the wall glowing blue. I still imagine that. I think it's pretty hilarious. So,
whenever you talk about him glowing blue, I'm just imagining that blue armor he wore in Dune.
Oh, man, yeah. The less said
stuff
about that movie, the better.
Yeah, it's
Sadly.
true.
So we get the White Council acting. That would be the White Council, I should say, not the Council of Elrond acting in this case when Gandalf says that. So we're talking about who's in that. That's going to be...
It's still far too early in the Council of Elrond for any action to take
Well,
place.
you're not kidding. They can't even make a decision, let alone take action. So who's in the White Council, right? We got Elrond, Gandalf, Galadriel, Saruman. Is Radagast part of the White Council? I would imagine he is.
I don't think he is, because when Gandalf mentions him in the next chapter, he says he hasn't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's mentioned that Círdan was part of it.
Oh, that would make
was
sense.
Occasionally part of it.
Yeah.
But I can't remember where I saw that.
We don't really have a definitive list of members of the White Council, do we?
No, we don't.
Well, whoever it was, they failed to defeat Sauron, so good on them. I mean, thanks a lot.
What about Celeborn? Was Celeborn?
Galadriel was. Maybe he's just, home watching the kids. I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, he isn't as powerful as Galadriel by any stretch of the imagination.
No. He's probably just taking the minutes. Bringing the coffee.
There you go. Would you like some cold water, sir?
Bring in the Mirrorvore,
There you go.
But yes, as you said, regardless of who's on the committee roster,
wasn't enough.
They failed to defeat Sauron. Yeah, right. Apparently, they didn't have nuclear Galadriel.
No, they needed nuclear Galadriel. Everybody needs nuclear Galadriel.
Yep.
No. For those who don't know what we're talking about the Jackson film adaptations that actually showed the attack.
Showed them. Yeah.
It was a very unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
The whole film that was. Anyway, so then we get Saruman's conclusion, like we talked about. I know.
Where's the Peter Jackson Hobbit films pinata? Put next to the Feanor pinata.
How did I know that was coming? It's not quite up on the Feanor level, let's be honest. I mean, we may beat them up pretty bad, but they're not Feanor.
No, not nearly.
There's a difference between bad and evil. I mean, I don't want to credit those films as being intentionally evil. Just bad.
No, I know.
Oh, goodness.
Mistakes were made.
Let's put it that way. Absolutely. Well, folks, there are many mistakes in this episode, but we'll address them as we may. For now, though, that does wrap up our discussion on the second part of the Council of Elrond, but we are not done yet. We've got Bartleman's Bag coming your way in just a minute. There's some great questions tonight. And even when that's done, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on...
Corrections even when we don't ask for them, by the way. I would just make that clear.
Yes. And I shouldn't say corrections on every episode.
There are a few episodes that don't require corrections, surprisingly.
Yeah, believe it or not. There's an assortment of those various kinds of commentary on every episode, as well as updates from us throughout the week, outtakes, fun stuff like that. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
You know, I should actually expand on that. Please do click both like and follow. I've heard from people who are like, hey, I didn't see this post. And it turns out they like our page but didn't follow it. You have to do both. Facebook's algorithms. Even then, you're still not going to see every post, unfortunately. And folks, we do have another common room on Reddit now. You can find great discussions there at r/Prancing Pony Pod. I believe we're already up to 350 or so members there. And they are very active. So it's a great place to have conversations.
After only a few weeks, it's been a fantastic place to hang out. Yep.
It really is. And of course, as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram with the handle @Prancing Pony Pod. So follow us wherever you happen to be. And if you like us, please share us on Facebook, on Twitter, Reddit, or anywhere you can find Tolkien fans.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, especially if they're good feelings, give us a review on iTunes.
Only if they're good.
Well, we'll take any feedback, but we really like the good ones. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is, which helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans we've built together with your help.
That is true. And folks, if you would like access to exclusive Patreon content like postscripts, quarterly specials, PPP swag, and, a Discord live episode recording like a number of people are listening to right now.
Right now as we speak.
Then you're going to want to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the Fellowship of the Podcast. Now,
indeed,
I think it's time, since we have a number of good questions in the bag, to see what Bartleman has for us. Sean.
Okay. We are going to start with a follow-up from 2 listeners on episode 137. Now, in the intro to that episode, around the 15-minute mark, Alan and I were recapping our favorite memories from Tolkien 2019, and I mentioned walking down the street and being recognized by our voices by a young couple in front of us who stopped and turned around and asked us if we were the guys from the Prancing Pony Podcast. I couldn't remember their names. Alan, you thought they were on their honeymoon, but that was really all we could remember about
who
they actually were. Well, I am so happy to report we actually heard from them.
Yay!
Molly from Oregon and her newlywed husband, Joe. Yep, Molly and Joe. So Molly came forward to identify herself and her husband, Joe. That very same day, she actually wrote in and said, I have not actually listened to this week's episode yet. This is how quickly she sent it. But my husband sent me a text saying that I should email you to tell you that was us, and we were, in fact, on our honeymoon. Yay. I assume this will make sense when I listen to this week's episode, but I'm still working through the Tolkien 2019
Don't assume
episode.
anything when it comes to us.
She went on to say, it was such a delight to meet you guys at the conference, especially for me. I've been listening for a couple of years now, and Joe is likely sick of me talking about you, but he puts up with it anyway.
Good man.
I was on my weekly commute from Eugene to Reedsport when you first mentioned the conference, and I called him from the car and asked if we could go to Birmingham for our honeymoon.
Wow.
So you are the reason that we went to the UK and amazing places like Stonehenge, Peel Castle, Liverpool, and the rest.
Oh.
I love your jokes and references, even the groan-worthy ones, and I look forward to each week's episode and the postscripts that follow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Molly. That's awesome. Awesome to hear.
I love that they went to Liverpool. I wonder if she was a singer in the band. Sorry, it was a Beatles reference, a really obscure one. Molly was a singer in the band. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Life goes on. Yeah.
Didn't get it. That's not even an obscure reference. I don't know why I didn't get it.
Was I missing something?
I know that song.
Well, I mean, I was trying.
No, you're totally right. I just didn't get it.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right.
Oh, man. All right, man. How did I not get an Obla-Di Obla-Da reference? I don't know.
I don't know either.
But anyway, well, she goes into a question, which we'll get to in a moment, but I just want to skip ahead to the closing where she says, thank you for being willing to stick with this project that has grown far past your expectations and for creating such a wondrous thing. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Molly.
Very kind. Thank you, Molly, for listening and for sharing us with your husband, Joe. It was really great to meet you both in Birmingham. And we are thrilled to know that our show helped you pick such an amazing place to celebrate your honeymoon.
Absolutely. 100% co-signed. It was great meeting you both and a unique experience for me.
One I keep talking about. I keep talking about how we were just walking back from the store and we're talking about like bottled water and these Two people turn around and go, "Are you the Prancing Pony podcast?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just truly an amazing experience. And so I just wanted to say thank you both for stopping to say hello.
Absolutely.
I hope you guys had a wonderful time on what sounds like a completely amazing honeymoon. And I promise that I will not forget your names again, Molly and Joe. So thank you guys.
Especially now after the Obladi reference,
Right. Exactly. Well, now on to Molly's question. Well, actually, it's Joe's question.
Okay.
Molly says it's not a very serious one, but a fun one, I think. After the attack on the Prancing Pony that ruins several good bolsters and give the hobbits another dose of hard reality, we are told what comes of the ponies that flee the inn and make their way to Tom Bombadil. Joe's question is why we get this lengthy explanation of what happens to the ponies. Why is what happens to the ponies so important as to warrant that much detail of their futures? Molly says, I myself find it a lovely interlude, but it is a strange one.
Indeed. It is a little bit strange, but we covered that in episode 127. We talked about how the text pauses the action to tell us Merry's ponies had escaped altogether, and eventually, having a good deal of sense, they made their way to the downs in search of Fatty Lumpkin. So they came under the care of Tom Bombadil for a while and were well off. But when news of the events at Bree came to Tom's ears, he sent them to Mr. Butterbur, who thus got 5 good beasts at a very fair price. They had to work harder in Bree, but Bob treated them well, so on the whole they were lucky. They missed a dark and dangerous journey. But they never came to Rivendell. And we talked about how that last line just speaks volumes. The ponies were lucky, they ended up safe, but they never came to Rivendell, which would have been an amazing place, really. I mean, pony heaven, which is very different from the glue factory, let's just be clear. Sorry.
Yes, very different.
Sorry, Trigger. But we never talked about this little fast-forward moment feeling out of place, which, honestly, it's because it probably didn't seem to us to be out of place at the time, did it?
No, I agree. Yeah, I think this is probably just another example of that different tone of Book 1 compared to Book 2 and the rest of The Lord of the Rings. A passage like this would never fit in with the later story, I don't think. But in Book 1, it doesn't really feel all that out of place at all. You know, after the sentient fox and all of Tom Bombadil's silly names for the ponies.
Sharp Ears, Wise Nose, Swishtail.
And his own Fatty Lumpkin, who's named in the passage. But yeah, honestly, I think it's mostly just a case of different tone.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the narrator of The Hobbit slipping back in again. And it seems very much in line with passages that you get from The Hobbit, like the whole bit about, if you have ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was only poetical exaggeration applied to any Hobbit. You know, that whole thing. Right. That's followed by that complete digression on Bull or Took and the invention of golf.
Digression, right.
Or from the very beginning of the book where he skips ahead and says, you will see whether he gained anything in the end.
Right.
Very much in line with those kinds of things.
It is. It's definitely a tone thing. But I have to say, it also seems like a mini eucatastrophe here, maybe even a micro eucatastrophe. It's even smaller in scale, to show us that Bartleman is rewarded for his generosity in the end by getting those 5 good ponies for the fair price, the price that he had to pay for the ponies that got stolen. They got returned, and so he got value for them. The fact that Tom is involved is what really should give us a clue that there is a little eucatastrophe here. So,
yeah, that's a good point. A little bit of a little softening of the blow, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Things are going to turn out okay.
A little Middle-earth karma for Butterbur there.
There you go.
Now, our next question comes to us from Tracy G., who sent us a handful of questions on the Council of Elrond that we'll cover as we can over the next few episodes. This one is, could we get some word nerdery? Well, she came to the right source. Could we get the answers? Yes. On how Tolkien uses the word wise. The wise is a phrase thrown around a lot, but then we also hear Gandalf refer to Sauron as wise, for he is very wise and weighs all things to a nicety in the scales of his malice. What say you, our resident word nerd, Sean?
Well, okay, let's start with the word wise itself. The Oxford English Dictionary offers a few definitions of it, the first 3 of which I think are useful to the discussion here. So the first definition is having or exercising sound judgment or discernment, characterized by good sense and prudence as opposed to foolish. The second one is having practical understanding and ability, skillful or clever.
Right.
The third is having knowledge, well-informed, instructed, or learned. Now, despite the fact that we usually think of wisdom as something different from intelligence, and every D&D player knows that's true. Etymologically,
and we have neither, by the way. Let's just make that clear.
No, but we have played a lot of D&D, so we know
we've min-maxed, and I don't know, what did you end up maxing out? Because it wasn't wisdom or intelligence.
Yeah, no.
Charisma, man. We maxed out
probably
charisma.
Dexterity, you know.
There
I wanted
you
to be like I was always the thief.
Were you? Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to digress there.
Only in D&D. I was only ever a thief in D&D. I want to put that out there.
Okay,
that is not a soundbite
I
want out there in the world. Yeah.
I might just pull that out and make it a little standalone sound clip.
You're just going to cut that in with
big
something
confession
else.
from Sean Marchese.
What did you do? How did you spend your weekends in high school, Sean? I was the thief.
All right. Anyway, back to the word wise.
Yes. Despite the fact that we usually think of wisdom and intelligence as two different things, etymologically, the word wise is related to Germanic words for knowledge and intelligence, words like wit, and also some words in German. And also it's related to words for knowledge and sight, believe it or not, in Greek and Latin and Sanskrit and other Indo-European languages. It's a really old Indo-European root. Tolkien actually uses the word wise both ways. He uses it to refer to, let's say, both D&D stats, to wisdom and intelligence.
One of our favorite definitions in the Silmarillion, which we've talked about before, is in the index, where Noldor is defined as the wise, but wise in the sense of possessing knowledge, not in the sense of possessing sagacity or sound judgment. Now, that hints at both senses and tells us that although Noldor means wise, it really means more what we would call intelligence or knowledge more than wisdom. Maybe, not street smarts, but just smart.
Book smart.
Exactly. Now, I'm also remembering the moment in The Return of the King when Denethor tells Gandalf, "You are wise, maybe, Mithrandir, yet with all your subtleties you have not all wisdom." Now, that's Denethor telling Gandalf that although he may be wise, he really is more subtle in the sense of clever or intelligent.
Yeah, it is. And those two meanings are inherent in the word wizard itself, which is related to the words wise and wit.
True.
In letter number 156 to Father Robert Murray, Tolkien said, "The Istari are translated wizards because of the connection of wizard with wise, and so with witting and knowing. But the Quenya word Istari, or singular Istar, actually means those who know, rather than those who are wise. In the essay on the Istari in Unfinished Tales, Tolkien says, the translation, though suitable in its relation to wise and other ancient words of knowing, similar to that of Istar in Quenya, is not perhaps happy, since the Heren Istarion, or Order of Wizards, was quite distinct from wizards and magicians of later legend."
So maybe Tolkien is hitting closer to home when he calls the wizards the wise, which he sometimes does. Now, more commonly, he uses the wise to mean the wizards plus some more, like the great elf lords, Elrond, Galadriel, Celeborn, Círdan, Glorfindel, and so on.
Yeah.
But at other times, Tolkien just uses the word wise. Now, this is in lowercase. When he's talking about the wise, it's capitalized. But he might use the word wise to describe individual characters, and he can use it in both senses. Sometimes it's the wisdom sense, sometimes it's the intelligence sense. Gollum calls Frodo wise. Gandalf describes the people of Gondor as a good and wise folk.
Yeah, near the end, actually, Saruman calls Frodo wise and cruel. So calling somebody wise isn't necessarily a good thing, although from our perspective, Frodo is certainly wise in a good way, but that's not what Saruman means when he says it.
No, not at all.
I think that's how Gandalf can use the word wise to describe Sauron, who does in fact have knowledge and intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Just like when he calls Sauron the Great, which we discussed many episodes ago.
Yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, he does that. He doesn't necessarily mean it in a good way.
No.
It's kind of the same thing here. Sauron is wise. He does have knowledge, but Gandalf isn't saying that he's wise in a good way.
Right,
So,
exactly. So
there you go.
There you go, indeed. Do we have time for one more? I think we do.
I think we do. The last one we've got is a quick one. Shai in Israel asked, except for Boromir, who came to Rivendell by chance and not summoned by Elrond, all the others came or arrived exactly when Frodo came to Rivendell. Isn't that too much of a coincidence? They all came from far places in Middle-earth, the Grey Havens, the Lonely Mountain, Mirkwood, and Boromir rode from Gondor more than 100 days to Rivendell. Now, Shai asked this a few weeks ago, so he could not have heard last week's episode with Corey Olson, in which we did basically discuss this.
Unless he had a time machine and a private link to our Zencaster room.
Right, right. But we did talk about it there, didn't we?
We did. And although it's easy to forget this, Elrond didn't summon the others. He didn't summon Legolas or Gimli and Glóin or Galdor and the others. In fact, he tells them at the start of the council, "That is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come and are here met, in this very nick of time, by chance as it may seem. Yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is so ordered that we, who sit here, and none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did talk about this use of called, and I think Corey actually called this providence, right?
Yeah.
We might say it's the hand of Iluvatar or the divine plan.
Right.
But all of them, including Boromir, who was led by the dream that he and Faramir had, as we were discussing earlier, all of them were called there.
Right, in one way or another, but not
Called
by
with,
Elrond.
almost with a capital C.
Yeah.
Not literally a capital C, but you can imagine it with a capital C.
Exactly. So for more on this, you're going to want to go back to last week's episode 142 when we talked about this at length with Corey Olson. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. Now, please be sure to join us again next week when Gandalf commits a serious breach of etiquette.
Well, it can't be anything worse than we've done on this show, though.
Oh, no. Heavens no, it won't be anything worse than that. As always, folks, we want to thank each of you for listening, and we want to give a very special thank you to our growing list of patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier. DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, and Mario in Utah. Thank you all so very much.
Wow, that list really is growing.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. And folks, make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and, well, most of all, your brother's mysterious prophetic dreams to Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Only the prophetic ones, please.
That's going to flood our inbox, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I don't want, Let's leave that there. And folks, you know Barlaman's not always punctual with the mail, but we will get back to you as soon as we can. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
It took me that long to get what you were implying. Yeah, I don't want to know your brother's mysterious dreams unless they are prophetic.
No, just
Please
the
keep
prophetic
them to
mysterious
yourself.
dreams.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, folks, this has been, as it always is, far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.